Andy Waters, LPUG Chair. The brackish water issue that we just took off the board meeting, I just wanted to bring it to the attention of the board that we had prepared a little presentation that with a few slides that we'd like to show during public comment. It's requested by Lynn, I believe. And talking to that order is the fact that if I'm looking back at the LPUG minutes and reviewed, because this issue came up, because it was brought in front of LPUG, we didn't know if it was going to be on the agenda, if it was going to be off the agenda. We've asked for time on this and time again. Because of this item, we did not get to our allocation meeting. We didn't get to discuss the allocations in front of the full board. We skipped voting panel stuff, and there was a lot of time and effort that we had to readjust so that we could have that item number 3. And I appreciate it being pulled again so we could discuss it more. But just so the board's aware that maybe we could get some more direction or some more clarity when these items come up. I get it with the last item that we had at the last board meeting as far as the boundaries, that was an item that we had to focus our attention on because of the time requirements put on by the state, and we got it down, and we got a lot of responses, and we got a lot of participation by not just the LPUG group, but all the other people that were watching, and we appreciate that. But just so we know that this one simple item cost LPUG almost a month of pushing back other items that are, I believe, to be extremely important, one being the allocation item that we're trying to work through. So,
okay, so let me, just for my clarification, I believe you guys have some slides kind of outlining, and so are you asking to show those now, or what can we?
Yeah, we're asking to show those now just for clarification for the board, and then I guess maybe in future reference to items that come up like this from staff or from whoever that brings them up, that if it's important, we need to deal with it. We need LPUG to deal with it as a group. But if it's something that holds us back from getting to our end objective, which is the allocation at this point, just to be aware of.
Okay.
I could call Brian up now if the slides are ready.
Here's the problem. I want to be very careful. The item is now not on the agenda, so I got to be real careful that we don't get ourselves into any discussion, either from the public or the board, on what you're going to cover.
Give direction on it.
Or give direction. So I'm concerned.
It's information only, so whatever you want to do with it's fine.
Okay. So I'm concerned that we walk that very fine line, and there may be others who said, well, if LPUG was able to do that, I would have done that, and then we're in a Donnybrook. So I think, in the abundance of caution, I would rather not do that. We've now got it on the agenda for the first May. Special May meeting in May. With regards to your second point, and I think it is a valid point, part of the problem is that there are items that are on the agenda, and via groups dealing with these items, feedback gets to members of the board and or staff, and in the abundance of caution, after the agenda is produced and formalized, the abundance of caution, people say, you know what, maybe we ought to give it a little bit more time. So that's why these items are moved off. If we had a policy that says once an item gets on the agenda, we're not taking it off, then we'd solve the problem that's been raised. That is, people would have certainty that item is going to be discussed. However, some of the feedback that I had gotten, and I think Jeff had gotten, and others, was that this item needs to have more time to sort itself out. And hopefully, if we do that, when it does get to us in May, a lot of the issues that are being concerned about will hopefully work themselves out, and we'll get a more finite decision that the board actually has to make. Given the fact that the item is not on the agenda, I don't think Dave is here, right? I don't see Dave.
Dave did come in, but the City of Camarillo and their partners left after they heard your board pull the item.
So I think in the abundance, Andy, I think in the abundance of caution, I think you raise a good point. The flip side of it is that A lot of folks don't deal with these issues until the 9th, 10th, and 11th hour, and I would argue that the board trying to be responsive and the agency trying to be responsive pulls it at the 11th, 10th, 11th hour so that people have time to consider it and have more discussion before we're forced into directly or indirectly some decision matrix. So.
No, and I understand that, but I think the item was for discussion only purposes. It wasn't, or maybe board direction. But and my point to that was, we'd spent countless hours over the last, I think, since Thursday, all the weekend, preparing back and forth. Many man hours spent on this one item to get to this point. I just wanted to make the board aware that when LPUG comes and goes, hey, we don't have our allocation plan ready. We were discussing these fine topics and we were trying to work through that. Well, we spent a whole month on this one item. And I just wanted to make the board aware of that, and that, going forward, that they're aware. So,
yeah, and I appreciate the time and energy that you put in. I think it generated at least in my mind, a sense of caution. All that work that I think everybody has put in, we'll see all of that come May, because I think it's important that the cities be here as well. And if both members of the city cannot be here, then I don't think that's appropriate. Hence, that's why it's May. So. I'm talking here. I'm looking at the board members, see if they are okay with this as a direction.
Chair,
I agree.
Go ahead, Ms. Craven.
No, my 3 words, I agree.
Okay, Dave?
I can understand if you don't want to open up the public comment section to presentations and all manner of, that makes a certain amount of sense. But if folks have prepared some comments, I think we ought to hear them.
Comments, if people want to make some comments.
Because this section is for comments not
Yes.
on the agenda.
Yes, I'm okay. Yes, it's a comment
Yeah.
session, but I'm not comfortable with doing a
Fine.
slide presentation.
I'm okay with that.
Expanding that out. You okay?
Thank
All right,
you.
thanks. Anybody else having comments? Okay, board member comments. Any board member comments? It's deep in the rain season, folks, and we don't have rain.
Oh, we had that big rain on Monday. I heard on TV it was going to rain.
Interesting enough, KNX 1070 radio is announcing that, and they've interviewed some folks, and because we've had El Nino effect in Northern California, we in Los Angeles are in great shape, blah, 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 blah. And I personally think that is the wrong message to be delivering, particularly those entities that rely on groundwater, because it has not solved the groundwater problem. So we obviously have a lot of work in front of us, and this next year,
Mr. Chair.
statistically, if you plot this out like United does, we are on the backside of a statistical probability of anywhere getting close to normal. So.
Yeah, I had planned to bring that up, and I forgot. But I've had conversations with 2 people who had no idea I served on this board or any other board. I was just a grandmother talking to other people. And I said Monday, gee, this is a big storm, and we were supposed to have a storm today. And they said, oh, that's all a myth. There's so much rain up north, we don't have to worry about it. And I said, well, that doesn't help our aquifers any when it rains up north. Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm just wondering, I don't know of anybody else who's going to do it. Maybe we need to get a press release or 2 well timed out to let the media know so they can inform the people that it really does matter. We still have a problem down here with water.
Okay. Jeff, did you hear that?
Yes, we
Okay.
can do it.
All right. Any other board member comments? I'll ask. I delayed and I didn't see anybody jump up, so let me ask again. Anybody public comments? Okay. All right. Let's go to the consent agenda.
Move the approval.
Motion to approve. Anybody?
Second.
A motion and a second. Let's do it as a roll call, please. Unless there is any discussion, comments. Okay, roll call, please.
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Bennett? Yes. Director West?
Yes.
Director Borchard?
Yes.
Okay, item number 2.
Good afternoon, Chair Mulhart, Directors. I'm Tully Clifford with the Public Works Agency. I'm the Director of the Watershed Protection District. I'm here today just to talk about the item which is the GMA board member appointments and committee assignments. Quite simply, the board letter outlines the appointments of 2 of the sitting members, and what we're looking for the board to do then is to select the committee assignments, and outlined in the board item are what the committees are, as well as last year's assignments to those committees. So at the will of the board, we're looking for your selections for this year.
Okay, let's deal with the first things. Let's deal with the first things first, selecting a chair and a vice chair. I'm opening it up to members.
I'd like to move that we maintain the current chair.
Second?
Okay. All right. Can we do the chair and the vice chair together, or do they have to be done separately as a motion?
You can do them as one motion.
And if the current vice chair is willing to sit again, I would recommend we renominate the current vice chair as well.
Okay, a motion and a second to retain the chair and the vice chair as the previous year. Any other discussion?
I think there's somebody there who wants to talk on this.
Okay, let's do a roll call on that one.
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Director West? Yes. Director Borchert?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk
Thank
about
you.
let's talk about committee assignments. We have kind of moved away from a lot of committee meetings because of the GSP process. I would encourage us all to use the committee assignments if necessary to help supplement the GSP process and keep moving it along if necessary, so that the intent was that we wouldn't spend hours on end at the board level arguing about some items. The current structure we have is on the back page of 2.2. I'm open to making some adjustments. The executive committee is kind of stuck because that's just the way the executive committee is. So, Dave, do you want to flip with somebody, or you want to stay in where you are, or?
I'm fine with where I'm at. I just assume not change.
What do you, Steve?
My sense is we're so focused on the other thing, we don't want to be making changes in structure right now and having somebody learn a new committee or anything. I'd keep everything just like it is so we can keep focused on the general plan.
Okay.
If that's a motion, I'll second.
That is now a motion.
That's a motion. That's a second. Any other discussion? Okay, Jessica?
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Director West?
Yes.
Director Borchert?
Yes.
Okay, now item 3 was pulled. Let's go to item 4.
Chair Mulhart, item 4 is an update on the groundwater sustainability plan, and we intend to bring this item to your board every month to let you know how things are going. Basically, from the broad brush look, things are going very well. I think the stakeholder groups that are working are very much engaged in the process, and as you can tell, if you throw them a slight loop, it throws them off, but they are very much engaged, and they're very interested in the process, and what we're getting back from them is very valuable information to move forward with the GSP process. One thing that we recognize as we're moving forward is we always talk about them as the stakeholder groups, and we've been reminded by numerous people that they are not the only stakeholders. And so what this item also outlines is our communication plan that we actually have a draft of it done now, which will broaden that stakeholder outreach so that we do get out to a lot of other people so that they are informed about what is going on. And we will bring that plan to your board relatively soon. And I think it's something that will help us in getting the word out and getting additional input, not just from the designated stakeholder groups. This update also talks about the draft emergency regulations dealing with SGMA. a little bit, and that's an ongoing conversation. We heard reference to that at the last board meeting as well. I just want to remind the board that the regulations are draft, and people are encouraged to submit their opinions and their thoughts on what should be included in the regulations. In that regard, there's actually a webinar tomorrow that people can participate in that the Department of Water Resources is putting on, so they'll hear a lot more about those regulations. And then the final thing, something that pops out of the regulations, one of the items, for example, is sustainable yield. And everybody that I've been talking to is now throwing their hands up. There's no such thing as sustainable yield. There's only sustainability criteria. We will work through all of those details as we're moving forward and come to your board and let you know what that means, how it impacts the plan, how it may impact any of the other components of the plan. So, but the bottom line is I think we're in real good shape. I'm happy with the consulting team we have in place. I'm happy with the stakeholder engagement. I'm actually quite glad when they do push back, when they express their concerns, because it gives us the opportunity to make adjustments and changes. We may not always agree with their suggestions, but I hope they keep coming nonetheless. It's been very valuable for the process. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any member have any questions or comments? Anybody in the audience? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, directors of the board. My name is Neil McGuire. I'm a member of LPUG. It sounds like Mr. Clifford might be introducing a plan here that will address this issue, but there was a specific item that's going to be introduced at the next TAG meeting on Friday that I think illustrates the need for that communication and that stakeholder involvement, and so I just wanted to reference that briefly. Item E on the TAG agenda is the introduction of the sustainability criteria, what's being called a spreadsheet. I haven't seen that yet. I don't know what it looks like. But as Mr. Clifford just mentioned, the sustainability criteria, those are really going to be the most significant factors in this process. They are going to be driving all of the other items under the DWR regulations, like the minimum thresholds and the quantitative objectives. And so that process, though, with regard to the criteria, appears to have started. It's going to TAG this week. It hasn't gone to stakeholders at all. And I don't know if that, again, is going to be part of the process that Mr. Clifford was referring to in terms of getting more stakeholder involvement. But it seems to me that that criteria in particular really requires a lot of outreach and then feedback from the stakeholders, given that it is so important and it will really drive the remainder of the process. So we want to make sure that we get off on the right foot here. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? This item is receive a status update from staff, and one of the comments that Tully made was that from staff's perspective, they're pleased with all the involvement of the different stakeholder groups. And I got to tell the board and the folks, I've said it before to a variety of individuals, but when you actually look at the amount of energy and work that's being done across the spectrum in all kinds of issues, it is really amazing and refreshing. I think we need to all kind of take a deep breath and be proud of ourselves that we have not basically, gone into the lawsuit mode. Yeah, I know there's some folks out there that are, concerned, but we've actually got groups engaged in multiple issues simultaneously. We allocated the biggest budget we've ever allocated. We had a huge debate on it, not total agreement on it. And that process going forward, when you hear some of the reports in the Central Valley where selected boards of supervisors have basically said, we're not going to deal with it, and basically have told the state to go pack sand. And we have folks up in Santa Maria. I saw Edgar came in a second ago. I guess he left, but they were going to make a presentation up in the area of Paso Robles about their problems up there and what we're doing down here. and they are just stuck in the sand in denial. So I think it's really amazing that all of the stakeholders have accepted the challenge that we have laid out at the board level. It's a difficult task. We've never done it before. There's no on-the-shelf thesis that we can pull over and just copy, paste, and insert. We're actually at the cutting edge of doing things. The state is watching us. Felicia is watching what we're doing and trying to push this out to other folks. Gordon Burns at the Cal EPA is watching what we're doing, and it's a compliment to all of you. The TAG is working aggressively to solve a very complex issue. We've got folks working to solve the allocation in 2 different basins. We've got stakeholders that are having meetings. We've heard from Andy and others how much work LPUG has put into this process. OPUG has stepped up and is accelerating through the process. We've got a market plan group that's trying to figure out a way to trade the pie, if you will. And we've got United and others, you haven't seen it yet, but in the back rooms trying to figure out how we're going to replenish this aquifer and the different projects that we need to bring on board and how we're going to pay for those. So my compliments to everybody. We're not there yet. I get that. It's not going to be easy. I get that. There's going to be disagreements. But in terms of outreach and getting stakeholder involvement, I think we are really working the process the way it was intended. And for that, I thank all of you. And I think it's very refreshing. Anybody else? Anybody else? Comments? Yeah. Okay.
Steve has
Steve?
one.
Very, very briefly, Michelangelo didn't have a template either. He was doing it all first time. So, yes, my mic's on. So, anyway, we don't have a template, but that gives us sort of free range to really do it right. And so I appreciate your comments, and I think you're right on in terms of there's lots of positive energy out there. Everybody has roles to play in this process, and stakeholders and everybody as we go forward. So I have one question for Tully, and then I want to talk about roles here for a quick second, and that is the request of the gentleman there that the sustainability criteria seem to be really important because they're going to drive sort of. Has everybody had an opportunity to, even if it's just in writing, say, hey, this is the sustainability criteria that we're going to be taking to the TAG for the initial discussion? Is that a public document? People have a chance to see that and comment on that?
Yeah, not at this time. We'll be moving forward from that on Friday's TAG meeting and go from there. So it's a little bit premature at this stage, but we're getting really close to that.
So when this goes to the TAG, is the TAG going to be making decisions at that point in time, or will that be the opportunity for people to have their first comment about the sustainability criteria?
Yeah, it's just the start. The sustainable criteria will take a while.
That'll help that gentleman. So that's the start, but it's not. It won't be the decision-making side of it. And I would just offer. I asked that question first because I would just offer, as you're talking about, as we're trying to craft this whole thing, and there is no exact template for doing this, and I think we all want to make sure we have a product that we feel really good about when we're done with these sustainability plans. The role of staff I see as just 2 things I want to make sure we highlight. There are lots of roles staff has, by the way, but 2 of them that I want to highlight is, one, to be that sort of honest broker that facilitates the information for everybody, just like this, to communicate so this person knows, hey, this is the criteria that TAG is doing, et cetera. And the other is they have to wear that hat of sort of the general public overall to say, hey, this makes sense, because when you're dealing with lots of stakeholders and the stakeholders have their particular interests, that's good, that's healthy, but somebody else has to be the one that sort of says, oh, that might be good for you, but this is what it does for the whole. And those are 2 roles that I just want to highlight here, that if staff plays those roles properly, both in terms of good communication, everybody feels like it's all fair, and staff is this sort of wears this other hat where they're not taking anybody's position, but they're trying to facilitate it for everybody, and then also they're wearing the hat of community overall, broad, the unrepresented public hat. If they do those 2 things right, I think it's really going to help us have that product that we're going to feel really good about when we're done. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, let's go to, thanks, Tully. Let's go to item number 5. Kathleen.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mulhart and directors. For the record, my name is Kathleen Rydell. I'm here to present item 5, and that is resolution to initiate a request to the California Department of Water Resources to modify the Bulletin 118 groundwater basin boundaries for the Las Posas Valley Basin, Pleasant Valley Basin, and the Oxnard Subbasin. As you will recollect, I was here on March 11th, and you directed staff, your board directed staff, to go back and clean up the red line strikeout version of the resolution. That has been done, and a clean copy has been provided in your agenda packet. And you also requested that the language of coordination between the basins be added. So those 2 items have been done, and we provided you with a clean version of the resolution. Once again, this is modifying 2 boundaries. It's the southern boundary, which is a scientific boundary, which is the Springville Fault, the western boundary, which is jurisdictional, and then the language change. So just to remind your board and the public, so this is a jurisdictional boundary along the western edge. It follows the property lines. It keeps the wells with the land served, and it generally follows the Wright Road Fault. The southern boundary is along the Springville Fault, which is part of the Simi Santa Rosa Fault system, and it is a scientific boundary modification. And then just so that you can see that it follows the parcels, we have provided you an overlay on the aerial photograph. Along as it was released to the public, we received stakeholder input. They suggested that possibly the wording be changed in our draft. They provided a red line strikeout. The red line strikeout has been provided as a separate page to you. This is a photocopy. I just made that as a picture and posted it on this screen for the PowerPoint. And it shows what has been stricken out of what we originally had on page 1. And they added a section on page 2. This references Article 8 of the draft emergency ordinance or regulations for the groundwater sustainability plan. Just so that you're familiar with Article 8 of the emergency regulations. This is an interbasin agreements. It's generally between 2 or more agencies. In the first part of it, it facilitates exchange of technical information, and it proposes a process to resolve disputes. The draft regulations have been provided to you. It's a 2-page, it's a single page printed on both sides. So you have the actual from the draft regulations, what it states. I'm just summarizing it here. So in summary, it states in the first part, or an agreement can include general information such as the parties that are involved in the agreement, what basins are involved in the agreement, what information that they want to establish beforehand that may be of dispute. Technical information that can be included in the agreement is general groundwater flow for the basins, the boundaries, consistent coordination of data, methods, assumptions. And also is an estimation of the stream aquifer interactions at the boundaries, establish common understanding of the geology, hydrogeology, hydraulic conductivity. So it's the technical information so that it's coordinated between the 2 basin groundwater, the groundwater sustainability plans. And it establishes the agreement can establish measurable criteria, monitoring networks that can be used to determine if the information that was originally provided is correct, if the flow is as it was originally proposed, if everything is going as originally planned in the groundwater sustainability plans, and if there's disputes, how they're going to resolve it and work on that. So that's what that section of the draft regulations is about. And it's working between an agreement between the basins, and it's trying to get things coordinated. Once again, these are the proposed changes for your consideration provided by stakeholder. And so the recommendation, you have either the one clean copy in your agenda packet, which references the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or you have the red line strikeout and clean version supplied, provided and suggested by stakeholder, that you could adopt that which references the draft regulations. So one of those needs to be moved forward as your preferred option. And our recommendation is to approve Resolution 2016-02 to initiate a request to the California Department of Water Resources to adopt a scientific boundary along the the shared boundary between the Las Posas Valley and the Pleasant Valley Basin. That's a scientific boundary adjustment. And the jurisdictional is the shared boundary between the Las Posas Valley and the Oxnard Subbasin. Any questions?
Okay, let me first have board members weigh in if they'd like, and then I'll go to the public if somebody wants to speak. Anybody have any questions off the top of their head they want to, or comments? Okay, what I understand, so that I make sure I understand, I have in front of me a clean copy dated 3/21/16 draft, and it has an expansion in paragraph 3 in the back, which mimics essentially one of the where.
It has some changes in one of the whereases, too.
Yeah, and there are some changes in one of the whereases, yes. So this section here, this red in the red line version has been incorporated in the clean copy, and the clean copy on the back side incorporates a renumbering from 3 to 4 and the addition of paragraph 3, right? That's what I have in front of me.
That is the proposal by the stakeholder, that we reference the draft regulations. And then, so that is one of the options. The other option is to stay with the one in your agenda packet, which references the act.
Okay. So really the question before us is, do we go to the clean copy draft that's been redlined, or do we go back to what's in the draft, or what's in the packet, which was staff's first cut at it, and since then we've gotten input from some of the stakeholders that they want to add some items to it, correct?
That is correct. They want to change and delete the reference to the act and put in just the reference to the draft regulations.
Okay. All right.
And what is staff's recommendation between the two?
I would like to defer to Al.
Well, my recommendation, if the board is inclined to adopt this additional proposed language, is that it be modified. I have some concerns with it as presently drafted. For one thing, it incorporates by reference some draft regulations, which at some point may become final, but at this point are not an adopted document. So if you are inclined to adopt this language, I would have it attached to the resolution. I have a partial copy of the regulation or the article that's referenced. I haven't had a chance to review it in detail to see if
excuse me, but based on the issues raised by them here, are you still comfortable with the original language that has been proposed, that it is effective and it does what we want it to do?
I believe it is adequate, yes.
I would just offer, given that we are on a time frame, right? This is our last meeting before this goes in. I'm very reluctant to adopt changes to language from the dais that, you know, our attorney hasn't clearly reviewed. And if he says the other one clearly does what we wanted to do, I'm going to have to really be convinced to adopt something that somebody's created that our attorney's not ready to say, oh yeah, I've reviewed this, I'm absolutely comfortable with it. He's not saying that, so I just want to get that said for whatever.
Charlotte.
Yeah, I guess this is the time. I was going to hear what people had to say, but I guess this is the time These are draft things. They haven't been adopted by anybody. They can be changed in any way. And so if we're going to base our resolution on something that isn't official, I'm not sure it gets us where we want to be.
Okay. Anybody else before I go to the public? Tully, did you want to say something?
Yes, Chairman. All I was going to say is the wording in that second document where it talks about Article 8, what it does is it says envisioned in Article 8. So what it's not doing is a specific reference to the article, but is instead saying, as written in those draft regulations, this seems to be a pretty good group of information or an agreement to put in place between the basins. And so from a staff perspective, looking at it in that regard, without a specific reference to the article, we were okay with this wording because what it's doing is sort of giving you a straw man outline for the agreements between the basins. So we were comfortable with that. We also, on the other hand, we also felt that the original resolution in reference is basically saying there has to be these agreements in between the basins. So we're totally mighty things. We're comfortable with that version too. We could work with either one because they're really saying the same thing.
Okay. Al, any comments?
Well, just a couple things. These are draft regulations or that DWR will be using to evaluate our sustainability plans. So they will be looking for the type of information that's in these regulations when they evaluate our plans. And so we will be bound by the regulations, whether or not they're in this resolution. The other thing is just, and this may be a technicality, but the reference to an agreement creates an impossibility. This article in the draft regulations is addressed at a situation where different agencies are managing adjacent basins, and so enter into an agreement to coordinate their efforts. The agency, as a technical matter, can't enter into an agreement with itself. So the existing language, or the language that was in your board package, had the more general reference to coordination that will result in or will avoid the type of undesirable results that SGMA is mandating that we address.
Okay. Okay. Let me go to the public. Anybody in the public comments? Jürgen?
Good afternoon. Jürgen Gramko, representing the Oxnard Pleasant Valley Landowners Group. We were the stakeholders that provided this language. We provided it on the basis of it providing more specificity as to what a coordination agreement would look like. Even though these are draft regulations, the detail, the outline that's provided there is very useful and would be a guideline by which to come to some coordination agreement. The fact that it's draft, like our counsel stated, you could incorporate the entire language and get around the question of whether it being a draft. And the fact that we're dealing with a draft is really the consequence of the fact that the Fox Canyon GMA is out ahead of everybody else. If we were going a little slower, then the draft would probably be some implemented regulation, and we could make the referral to them. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Hi. Good afternoon again. Neil McGuire, this time on behalf of the Del Norte Water Company, which, as you recall, we were advocating for the jurisdictional boundary. And at the last meeting, I believe Mr. Gramkow raised this reference, the desire for this reference in the resolution. This is the first time that I've actually seen the red line and have had a chance to look at the specific language. I think we agree with the concept in general of referring to the DWR regulations. I'm wondering if, because of the draft nature of these, if maybe a solution that works for the Oxnard PV group would be to stay with the original language in the resolution for now, and then hopefully when these are adopted in a timely fashion on June 1st, have folks come back, just to have staff come back with an updated resolution, just to clarify the coordination agreements between basins and involving 2 GSPs would be subject to what are hopefully at that point the existing regulations, and which are no longer in a draft form. And I don't think we'll be so far along the road with regard to the GSPs where that we get out too far ahead of that. We're just a few months out from June 1st. So maybe that addresses the issue. I would just say beyond that if the board is considering the adopted language, I would suggest that it terminate after the, I'm looking at the red line now.
Okay.
Let me look at the recital, first of all, the whereas, that terminate after the parenthetical that says dated February 18, 2016. And then same thing in the new paragraph 3, that language also terminate after the parenthetical that says February 18, 2016. The language after that, I think in concept it's not too far off from the regulations, but it doesn't exactly mimic what they say, and I don't know that it's absolutely needed to get the concept across. So those are the comments from Del Norte. I'd be happy to answer any questions if the board has any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, what we have before us is a resolution in our packet that council has indicated is acceptable to council and doesn't pose a number of the questions that doesn't trigger a number of the concerns that the new draft or this other draft that we have in front of us. We also have this draft in front of us with language that OPUG has put in. We just heard an alternative of drafting or adopting the resolution in our packet, getting it to the state so it's at least on the record to solve this problem. If at some future date there is, in fact, a change in the draft to a permanent coding, we always have the ability to go back and rewrite or readopt a revision to this resolution or have a new resolution. So those are the choices in front of us.
I'll move to adopt the resolution as stated in the packet that was sent out to people.
Okay. There's a motion.
I'll second that. And I just want to explain.
All right, let's have a discussion.
Sort of the irony that I find myself in. I actually want the extra protection that is in this other one. It's just my policy that I've got to have, if I'm going to do the resolution, I've got to have county council say they've reviewed it, they feel good about it, and we don't have that. So I just have to trust that we've got enough in here. But if you remember, my comments last week were I'm concerned about making sure we have safeguards so that these wells that are potentially affecting the forebay, if we need something to happen to those wells because of the forebay, we have the ability to do that. And so I'm just going to ask this question. If we say, hey, these wells are affecting the forebay, either we're going to put on some kind of regulation on forebay wells, will we be able to do that with this language that you have in the current staff original proposed resolution?
Yes, and to remind your board that the previous language is right out of SIGMA. So it's directed at that very issue. And as you move forward, you will always have the ability to address the specific elements that are in the draft regulations. So this is not foreclosing that at all.
So I appreciate the efforts of the people trying to come up with this other language. If it had gotten to the council and he would have said, hey, this is stronger language and I like it, I'd be there. He's not saying that, so that's where I would be. Right.
Okay. Gene.
The recitals to the resolution certainly speak to. Oops, sorry.
Which resolution?
The one in the board packet. The
Okay.
the
Thank
recitals
you.
in the resolution speak to coordination between the basins. But there's nothing about that in this resolution, in the resolved portion in the board packet. I certainly don't have any problem approving the resolution in the board packet if we can get staff to maybe bring us back a supplemental resolution in the future that speaks to that coordination issue.
Works for me.
Okay?
Maybe after the draft regulations become final and we can do everything at once.
Dave, any comments?
It just occurred to me, is it simpler just to cross out the words "by means of an agreement"?
Where?
I'm sorry, in the red line version? Take out the portion that deals
Where?
with making an
But there
agreement.
are two-
By means
Under
of
the
whereas
whereas.
is in the whereas, but it's not in the actual resolution. That's what you're referring to, right?
One of the problems that council said he had a problem with was the mention of making an agreement. And if we remove that 4 or 5
Yeah,
words.
it's in the, both of them.
It's in both of
There
them.
it is, yeah, it's in a different spot, I'm sorry.
Well, I think we have to deal with the motion on the floor before we can talk about another, unless that motion's withdrawn.
I think the prudent thing to do is to adopt the resolution as submitted by staff in our packet. I think we've said loud and clear, council has said, it does not preclude the ability to come back at a future date when this draft is finalized, compare what they say and what we have, and update where we should go. I think it is clear to everybody in the room, it's at least clear to me, that at the board level, we want to make sure we solve this problem. And if the state gives us better guidance, I'd be more than receptive to having staff say, you know, it's time to update that resolution to reflect that new language. And that would be in sequence to what council is telling us, that they have language that they believe meets our criteria. This is a draft. It means it could never, in fact, happen, or it could change all over the board. Let's see what they do. And I agree with Jurgen. We are ahead of the game. The state is playing catch-up to the GMA. Isn't that amazing? Well, welcome to our world. So I would support the resolution as it's made for staff's draft as we see it in the packet, with the caveat that we understand that at some future point we need to make the determination from a technical standpoint, from a legal standpoint, do we need to update our resolution, suspend it, and readopt a new resolution? In the meantime, we've communicated to the state this is where we want the line, and we're in the process of figuring out how to make that work. Okay? That's what
Just add this to the discussion, because here's what I will be concerned with that will happen at some point. At some point in time, when we're ready to finally say we want to draft something more specific, because the wells that are involved here, in other words, the wells that are outside of the, past the scientific line, but they're being included in Las Posas because they're in the property line. At some point in time, those well owners are going to say, now we're stuck with getting regulated by 2 different basins, and they're going to object to that. And I just want to make point of the fact that I raised that here at this point in time, said they chose that when they chose to lobby to put themselves in Las Posas, because they're going to have to now deal with the potential of being regulated by 2 different areas, because they wanted to have that the benefit of that. That's what I'm afraid is going to happen, and that's what I believe we're attempting to try to do, is make it really clear that we are reserving the ability to do that. So just by stating this, I hope it helps us when that discussion comes.
Okay. So we have a motion before us to adopt the staff's original draft in the packet, and a second. Any other discussion on that item? Jessica?
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Director West?
Yes.
Director Borchert?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we are now down to Executive Officer's Report. Jeff, do you have anything you'd like to report?
Couple of things, Chair. A reminder that the next symposium, annual AWA symposium, is on April the 21st. We typically reserve a table for those of you aboard who want to go. Those reservations are due by the 25th of this month, so if you haven't already done so, you need to let Jessica know that you'll be there. Second thing, a reminder of your Form 700s are due, it looks like April the 1st, for those of you who haven't filed those yet. And the final thing, and probably the most significant of the bunch, is that Jessica is leaving us. This will be our last board meeting with us. She's moving upstairs to apply her skills with the clerk of the board for the county of Ventura. So this is her last meeting. We want to give her a big send-off for it.
You realize this is more opportunity for Supervisor Bennett to harass you than it is to just deal with a little GMA. And I give you the opportunity to turn it down and stay with us. But, well, congratulations. You've done a great job for us. And Mandy is going to slide over and take your responsibilities, and she's going to do a great job. Every clerk we've had in this agency has done a fantastic job. We have been very fortunate with our clerks. You've done a great job. On every fourth Friday of the month, you can turn on the camera and watch us down here. Anyway, good luck to you. Thank you for all the kind work you did. I'd like to give her a round of applause. All right. Can I have a motion to receive and file the Executive Officer's Report?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Any objection? So ordered. Folks, 55 minutes. Now, the only reason we got there is we didn't have one item on the agenda. I didn't salt this just for that purpose, but I want it for the record that we did it in 50. You're leaving, and I haven't adjourned the meeting yet. Wait a minute. This is not right. Meeting adjourned.